Let's talk about the wolf mutts in the 74th Hunger Games and why they were so terrifying. For those who don't know what a mutt is, it is a genetically altered animal that can be used as a weapon, the capital being the ones to use these mutts as weapons. Now by weapon, I don't just mean physically, because mutts can also be used to cause extreme emotional distress or to get information. Now let's talk about the wolf mutts, the ones that killed Cato and how they're more terrifying in the books than in the movies. Katniss knows immediately when she sees these mutts chasing Cato that these are mutations. She says that they can't be natural-born animals. They're able to balance on their hind legs, and one of them waves forward the rest of the mutts with what appears to be a wrist attached to its paw. She also notes that it's clear that these things can see at a distance. The claws on these mutations are 4 inches long and razor sharp. Katniss says that they have an eerily human quality when they're standing on their back legs. And they all have different physical attributes. They all have thick coats of fur, but they vary in color, and some are curly where some are sleek and straight. Katniss knows that something is wrong with these mutts, but she doesn't understand why. It's not until she sees the mutt that's made to look like Glimmer that she connects the dots. Because these mutations are modeled after the dead tributes. Glimmer's mutt has green eyes, it has blonde fur, not to mention that it has a collar with the number 1 laid on it, as in District 1. That's when Katniss starts to notice the mutts that look like the other tributes. One looks like Foxface, one the boy from District 9, and one Little Rue. One of the most interesting part of the mutts to me is their collars represent the different districts, not just by the number. The mutt that appears to look like Glimmer has a collar that's inlaid with jewels, where the one that's meant to resemble Rue has a collar woven out of straw. District 1 being the luxury district, and District 11 being agriculture. These mutts are actually what injure Peeta's leg, and are the reason why it had to be amputated later on. Now, in the books, Cato's death is significantly worse. He does die to the mutts, but it lasts hours and hours and hours. Katniss describes the sun setting while the mutts are attacking Cato, and then later on, she describes the sun rising, and Cato is still alive. But I've already made a whole video on Cato's death, so I'm not going to get too into it right now. It always makes me wonder if Cato connected the dots that these mutts were supposed to resemble the dead tributes. And it makes me hope he didn't. Because he suffered in agony for hours, and it would only make his death worse if he knew the truth. That those mutts looked like his allies, and even those he killed in the games. Now, a lot of people think that these mutts were actually created from the bodies of the dead tributes. I personally disagree. It's not that I don't think that the Capitol would do that, because I absolutely do. It's that Peeta and Katniss both say that that's not actually what happened in Catching Fire. That it was a trick and that they were only made to look like the dead tributes. It's actually during the Quarter Quell when Katniss hears the Jabberjay mimicking Prim's screaming. She thinks to herself, it wasn't real, I tell myself, the same way the mutation wolves last year weren't really the dead tributes. It's just a sadistic trick of the game makers. Personally, I think that the mutts just looking like the dead tributes would actually fit the style of mutations more. Although these mutts were used to inflict violence, it would make sense that they were also used to create psychological horror. Also, we do know that the bodies of the tributes are sent back to their districts. So although I think it is something that the Capitol would do, I don't think that they did take the eyes of the dead tributes. But that is just personally my opinion. These mutts are the first real glimpse that we as the reader have into the series on how mutations can be used to kill. And when first reading about these mutts, it almost feels as if the Capitol could not create anything more horrifying. And then you read Mockingjay. I just think that these mutts are so interesting to talk about because they're not just dangerous physically, they're also dangerous mentally. Katniss has multiple nightmares about these mutts all throughout Catching Fire. They terrorize her dreams. When Peeta paints the horrors of the arena, one of the things that he paints are the mutts, because each one is so unique and different. These mutts in particular can actually communicate with one another, and they do. I mentioned earlier that one beckons the others forward with his paw, but they also make high-pitched yipping noises to one another. And Katniss actually notes that that's probably how they communicate. These mutts are nightmare fuel. I think I'm actually going to do a whole series on the mutts in the Hunger Games, just talking about each one that we hear about in their own videos. Let me know what you want to hear about next.